Hey gang, welcome back to another video. Now if you're anything like me, you've owned a few small fog machines throughout the years, but have always struggled to get the fog to spread throughout your entire display. Now if this sounds familiar, you're going to want to stick around, because in this video I'm going to show you how to build an inline fog fan. So let's get to it. This build consists of the following parts. 2 ABS 5 to 4 inch reducers designed for use in dust collection systems, a 5-inch computer fan, a few custom gaskets, and some 2-inch screws, nuts, and washers. The first thing I need to do is to glue the gasket to the reducer pipes, and for that I'm going to use my SureBonder Cosplay Stick hot glue. Not only is it great for EVA foam, but it's an industrial strength adhesive designed to be used with a variety of thermoplastics, so this is a perfect use for it. I cut these gaskets on my laser, but you could just as easily cut them from plywood with a jigsaw. And if you want to make one of these for your own fog machine, I've added a link to a free template in the video description. Once I've sealed the edge between the gasket and the reducer, I'll repeat it for the remaining pipe and gasket and then set them aside. This gasket is about 1/16 of an inch larger than the pipe, so that the hot glue can creep between the gap and the pipe and create a better bond. Next up is the 5-inch computer fan. This fan runs on 12-volt power and spins at 1600 RPMs, which should give me sufficient air movement for this test. Although if I had to do it again, I would choose a fan that's a bit faster. This fan will get sandwiched between the two pieces of pipe and held in place with these 2-inch screws, nuts, and washers. This will keep all of our parts aligned, making sure that the fan is set right in the middle of our reducer fittings. When I've got things assembled finger tight, I'll switch over to a screwdriver and wrench to lock it all into place, making sure not to over-tighten so that I don't crack the gaskets. You could swap this hardware for lock nuts if you wanted to really make sure they don't go anywhere, although I don't know that it's necessary for this build. The fan I'm using has an arrow marking on top to remind me which way the air flows, which should help me during setup. I don't know that this is common across all computer fans, but I figured it was worth pointing out. This fan in particular is slightly smaller than 5 inches, and there's a bit of a gap around the edge, so I'm going to apply a bit more hot glue around the inside edges of the gasket to close up those openings. This is probably unnecessary, but better safe than sorry. Now let's talk about power. This 12-volt power supply is a good match for the computer fan, so let's go ahead and wire it up. I've stripped the ends of all my wires and will be using Wago connectors, since they're more secure than wire nuts, and a lot faster to use, especially when doing this type of prototyping. If you're using my RCA jack lighting system, which also runs off of 12 volts, you could power the fan on that system. So instead of connecting directly to this power supply, you could add a male RCA jack to the fan wires and power it that way. If you want to know more about my RCA jack lighting system, I'll leave a link in the video description so you can check out that video after watching this one. With the wires connected and the power supply plugged in, it's time for a quick test. As you can see, it's definitely pushing air, and there's enough draw from the backside to encourage the fog through whatever type of hose you may be using. The only thing left to do now is to test it out with some fog. To be a little scientific about this, I'm going to start with my control and run the fog machine without any fans or hoses. And as you can see, it acts as you'd expect. The fog pushes out a few feet and then immediately dissipates into the air. Not particularly helpful if you're trying to use one fogger for an entire space. Now let's try it with a hose. Admittedly, this isn't the right type of hose to use for fog, since it's got a ton of little perforations. But what it does show is that the fog still wants to spread out immediately and doesn't have enough propulsion to make it to the end of this 8-foot hose. As a matter of fact, I had to hold down the fog button 3 times as long just to build up enough pressure for it to make its way to the end of the hose. Now let's try it with the fog fan in place. While there's still some fog escaping at the opening and through some of the perforations in the hose, the majority of the fog is making its way to the end of the hose, even after a short burst. The improvement between the 3 setups can really be seen when we compare them side by side.
Now this build isn't without its shortcomings, and there's definitely room for improvement, but for a one-day build, I think this gets the job done. I'd like to give a special thanks to this video's sponsor, Bonder, and be sure to check out their website for their entire line of products. That's going to do it for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, go make something.